మీరు ఆడియో తీసుకోవాలన్నా దీని నుంచి లేకపోతే ఇది ఇక్కడ నుంచి వస్తే కానీ మీకు ఇంకొక రాదు వీడియో రావట్లేదు ఆడియో
ఆడియో నేను తీసుకోండి ఆడియో
మీకు వీడియో రాస్తాను
ఇది దేనికన్నా మల్టీ కేబుల్
అందుకని మనకి ఆడియోకి సంబంధించి
ఒక్క నిమిషం ఒక్క నిమిషం సార్
India. We would like to share India, but how would we like to share India? That, in fact, is what this event today is about. We have Sitaram Yechury, a former member of parliament, student leader. His life is been of struggles, against emergency for a better India. He's here today to speak to us. Thank you, Sitaram. Thank you for coming over here. Thank you so much. But before that, I would also like to, have a heartfelt thanks from all of us over here to the Chaurasta team who has graciously come over here, accepted our invitation to perform in front of us. I will just take a minute to introduce Chaurasta the way I know them. Now, they are a very different band. They're a very progressive band who have taken social issues, societal issues, and brought them into popular imagination using their songs. I'm sure there is nobody here who hasn't heard a song from Chaurasta. They were extremely popular during the COVID pandemic as well. Their songs are talking about how to, do so this physical distancing or about displacement in the society. All of these things they are very, very popular. And thank you from all of us, Chaurasta team, for coming over here. We will start the event with a live music performance by Chaurasta. I hope you all enjoy it. The stage is now all set for Chaurasta. Thank you so much for coming in. A huge round of applause for Chaurasta.
ఇంకేదో పడదు ఇంకా పెట్టారు
నమస్కారం అండి మా బ్యాండ్ పేరు చౌరస్తా ఇక్కడ ఇదే విజ్ఞాన కేంద్రంలో నేను ఒక సంవత్సరం పాటు లెక్చరర్ గా పనిచేశాను ఐ యూస్ టు టీచ్ మిక్సింగ్ అండ్ ప్రోగ్రామింగ్ సో మళ్ళీ ఇక్కడ ఒక 5-6 ఏళ్ల తర్వాత మళ్ళీ ఇక్కడికి వస్తున్నాను నేను అది కూడా ఎందుకంటే ఒక బ్యాండ్ స్టార్ట్ చేసి ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి పర్ఫామ్ చేయడం నిజంగా చాలా సంతోషంగా ఉంది థ్యాంక్ యూ సో మచ్ ఫర్ గివింగ్ దిస్ ఆపర్చునిటీ ఆల్మోస్ట్ నాకు ఊహ తెలిసినప్పటి నుంచి నేను వింటున్నాను పాట. ఎక్కడో అక్కడ ఇక్కడ నాకు చాలా ఇష్టమైన పాట ఇది. సుద్దాల హనుమంతు గారు రాసిన పాట ఇది. చాలా గొప్ప పాట ఇది. నాకు చాలా ఇష్టమైన పల్లెటూరి పిల్లగారా పసులగారా పరుమరసి ఎన్నాళ్ళిందో పల్లెటూరి పిల్లగారా పసులగారే పొలగారా పరుమరసి కోట్ల మట్టాలి ఇప్పుడు పాడబోయే పాట కోవిడ్ లో చాలా మంది ఎక్కడ వాళ్ళు అక్కడే ఇరుక్కుపోయి కరెక్ట్ గా గవర్నమెంట్ వాళ్ళకి పర్మిషన్ ఇచ్చినప్పుడు ఎవరి ఊళ్ళకి వాళ్ళు వెళ్ళిపోయినప్పుడు ఈ పాట మీద కంపోజ్ చేశారు. ఇది ఏంటంటే ప్రతి వలస వెళ్ళి ప్రతి ఒక్కరి ఎందుకంటే ఇక్కడే ఇదే ప్లేస్ వర్క్ చేసినప్పుడు చాలా మంది మా ఫ్రెండ్స్ వరంగల్ నుంచి, మహబూబ్ నగర్ నుంచి, అక్కడి నుంచి ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి పని చేసుకుంటున్న వాళ్ళు కానీ ఇక్కడి నుంచి అమెరికా వెళ్ళి, దుబాయ్ వెళ్ళి, లండన్ వెళ్ళి, ఎక్కడికి వెళ్ళినా ఎక్కడ ప్రపంచంలో ఎవరైనా సరే వలస వెళ్ళి పని చేసుకునే వాళ్ళ కోసం ఈ పాట చేశాను నేను. ఈ పాట పేరు అన్నా నాన్న. కోసం భూమి కోసం చేసే భూమి కోసం నిన్ను మనసు ఒక్కసారి రావాలి లేదు రావాలి. మా పాటలు అన్ని పాటలు రాసేది మా ఆనంద్ గారే. మా ఊరు వెళ్ళిపోతే కానీ అన్నానం కన్నా కానీ అథवा ఇంకా ఏదైనా మాకు ఏదైనా మా ఆనంద్ గారు రాస్తారు. ఆయన రాదు జనరల్ గా అసలు ఎక్కడ స్టేజ్ ఇక్కడ. సో అయితే అట్లా వలస వెళ్ళిపోయిన వాళ్ళందరూ ఈ పాట పాడుకుంటే ఊరెళ్ళిపోతారు. అదే
ఇది కరెక్ట్ దేనికి వెళ్ళా కదా రీసెర్చ్ అది
సార్ మీరు చెప్పండి సార్ వాళ్ళు ఏదో లేదు వాళ్ళు వస్తారు కదా కొంచెం వేరే వాళ్ళు నమ్మరు సరే ఇక్కడ దాకా వచ్చాం కాబట్టి మేము ఎప్పుడు చెప్పే మాట చెప్తున్నాం, ప్రతిసారి చెప్తాం, ఎక్కడికి వెళ్ళా చెప్తాం ఈ మాట. ఎందుకంటే ఈ పాట దాకా వచ్చేసాం కాబట్టి. ఈ పాట కేవలం ఇక్కడ ఉన్న అమ్మాయిలకే డెడికేట్ చేస్తున్నాం. కేవలం అమ్మాయిల కోసమే. ఈ అన్ని చూసి బిస్కెట్ తిన్నారా? కొంచెం డీగ్రేడ్ అయ్యాం కానీ పర్లే, మంచి మెసేజ్ ఉన్న పాట మమ్మల్ని. అయితే ఇప్పుడు ఇప్పుడు మాట్లాడబోయే ఒక మాటకి ఈ పాటకి చాలా దగ్గర సంబంధం ఉంది. ఇప్పుడు కొంచెం సీరియస్ అయ్యాం, ఇక ఇంకా రెండు పాటలు సీరియస్ అయ్యి తగ్గిస్తున్నాం. ప్యాటర్న్ అంటే మీరందరూ కలిసి మాకు వచ్చిన సహాయం చేయాలి. అందరి దగ్గర సెల్ ఫోన్స్ ఉన్నాయి. యూట్యూబ్ లో చౌరస్తా అని ఒక పేజ్ ఉంటుంది, CHOWRAASTA యూట్యూబ్ లో. నచ్చితే సబ్స్క్రైబ్ కొట్టండి, లేకపోతే లైక్ తీసుకోండి. ఈ పాట మటుకు చూసి అందరికి షేర్ చేయండి, ఎందుకంటే ఈ పాట యొక్క ముఖ్యత్వం అటువంటిది. మీ సెల్ ఫోన్ తీసుకొని యూట్యూబ్ లో తీసి ఇమ్మీడియట్ గా చేయాల్సి. ఈ పాట పేరు ఏం పేరంటే కంచె లేని దేశం. ఈ పాట పేరు కంచె దేశం. ఈ పాట కూడా మా ఆనంద్ గారు రాశారు. ఈ పాటని కరెక్ట్ గా అర్థం చేసుకుని నలుగురికి ఈ మాటని స్ప్రెడ్ చేస్తే ఉక్రెయిన్ లాంటి దేశం ఆత్మను పడవదు. కరెక్ట్ గా అర్థం చేసుకోండి. ఎర్రిన కొర్రెలో పుర్రాలేని కొర్రె జాతి సంకర జాతి మనది కంచేరేడి దేశం మనది. ఎర్రిన కొర్రెలో పుర్రాలేని కొర్రె దేశం జాతి సంకర జాతి మనది కంచేరేడి దేశం మనది. అయ్యలేమో ఉత్తర దేశం దక్షిణ దేశం అయ్యది అయితే సంకర జాతి మనది కంచేలేడి దేశం మనది. మనది కంచేలేడి దేశం మనది. ఈ పాట పేరు ఏ అంగడి పోయేది ఏ రేఖ నమ్మేది. ఇది కూడా ఆనంద్ గారు రాశారు. ఎంత గొప్పగా రాశారు నాకు తెలియదు, కానీ ప్రతి మాట ఒక తూటాన్ని.
No amount of thanks will be sufficient, but I think the reaction was sufficient for us. Thank you, thank you. On Switch's side, I would request Sitaram Yechury garu to please hand over a token of memorabilia. Adla Sushma, can you please help? Yeah. Each of the members. Of course.
Down. Come down. కొంచెం బయట ఉండొచ్చు
Yeah, one more minute. Lot of fans. I think almost everybody is a fan here. Okay, we'll do that. All right, we can just sit down. All right. Thank you, thank you. There was both an electrifying as well as a moving performance, as always, from Chaurasta. We do hope to have you for a much bigger conference and events. Thank you so much, Chaurasta. Thank you for coming over once again. All right. So, I'll just take 2 more minutes of your time. This was back in 2007, 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago. It was the first time I was hearing, at that point of time, was a member of parliament. And he was talking about how they were using 8086 processors back in the 70s and how they have evolved and how they're relevant to the free software movement as well. Right? This was a person who was, this was an iconic photograph, which most of you would have seen. The Prime Minister of the country during the emergency, that too, and this was a student leader who was standing there reading out a list of demands, who was pursuing his PhD in economics back then, who had to give up the PhD also because he was leading the struggle against emergency. He was a student leader, he was a gold medalist in MA economics, he was also the All India first ranker in CBSE, and needs no introduction, but also a former parliamentarian, led a lot of JPCs, and somebody whom a lot of the when I was a student, I was looking up to them, and that's still an inspiration to a lot of us over here. I welcome on stage Sitaram Yechury garu.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that away. Otherwise, people will think that I'm also singing. Hello. Hi, everybody. Well, after the Chaurasta and the Maya that they spun, I don't think any one of you would be interested really in trying to listen to a very serious talk. So neither am I in a mood to give a serious talk. So I'm actually not going to talk to you. I'm not going to lecture you, but I'll have a conversation. Because that is the way I think this generation would like to interact. I've been asked to speak on the idea of India. What is this India that we are talking about, and what is it? What does it mean? Now, to understand the concept of idea of India, we have to go back a little into history, not only of our country, but also the world and the evolution of human civilization. There was a time when the transition from a feudal kingdom, where the kings and emperors used to obtain divine sanction or invoke divine sanction to rule, you reached a stage in development whereby the ruler and the subject was replaced by the nation and the citizen. The ruler and the subject replacing the nation and the citizen is when the nation states evolved. Now, when the nation states evolved, what was the normal norm in Europe from where all this began, this transition? The norm was that you had a majoritarian view of the nation. There was one majority and all other minorities, and majoritarianism became equated with nationalism. Now, in this evolution, this is important for us to understand what is happening in India today. When majoritarianism became equated to nationalism, the minorities were the targets on the basis of which this nationalism was consolidated. So you required an enemy within the nation, not an external enemy. You required an enemy within the nation in order to consolidate that nationalism, which is majoritarianism. Now, this process of the development of the nation state was varied and very, very different in various other countries, which were basically colonies. In colonial countries, nationalism meant, first of all, freedom from your colonial ruler, and the freedom for whom? And the freedom for whom became an issue in the sense it was natural that the freedom should be for all. Otherwise, there's no real freedom. So if it's for all, then what happens to this entire concept of majoritarianism? And what happens to the concept of a minority? So the idea of India was a concept that evolved through our national movement and the struggle for freedom. And it united in the sense, there's a normal misconception. People think it's the British that united India. But it was basically our struggle for freedom that united India. I mean, whether I'm a Telugu speaking, I'm born to a Telugu speaking family. I was born in what is today called Chennai, then it was Madras, in the General Hospital in Madras. I was educated here in Hyderabad and school education. And those days it was very, very strong Islamic flavor and culture in the 1960s. So I was educated and brought up with that milieu. So every second friend of mine is a Muslim. And every not third, but I'd say every fifth would be an Anglo-Indian. That tribe is now vanished virtually from this place. But you know, nobody even questioned, who are you, what is it? Then I went on to study in Delhi because education got disrupted. I was in the Nizam College doing my PUC. We lost 1 year. And then we went off to Delhi. Delhi, you studied in Delhi and remained there and did all my politics in Hindi. Got elected to the parliament from Calcutta. So I speak Bengali. I've married a lady now. She used to be a girl then. Whose father is a Islamic Sufi, whose mother is a Mysorean Rajput. So what would my son be? Is a Hindu, is a Muslim, is a Brahmin, is a lower Dalit? What would you call it? The only identity I have is India. Is an Indian. And that is the idea of India. And that is what we have to preserve. Now, this idea was not born overnight. It was born through a very, very long struggle. And the struggle actually dates back to what the battles that I was seeing today. The battles of majoritarianism versus minoritarianism versus what we call communal polarization, hatred, violence, etc. These battles that we've been today actually trace back to a long struggle over a century on what should be the character of independent India. One view, which was a majoritarian view of the leadership of the national movement, was that given India's diversity, given its plurality, it's so vast that there's no other country in the world that can match our plurality and diversity. Given this diversity, the only political structure that can keep this country and people together is a secular democratic republic. It was right. So this was the mainstream vision of what should be India after independence. As against this vision, there was the left vision, which now I belong to, in that generation where it was there, that which said, yes, it has to be a secular democratic republic, but it cannot stop there. The political independence we win should be converted into the economic independence of every Indian, which would mean that we'll have to move towards an egalitarian society. That is a movement towards socialism. Secular democratic republic that moves towards socialism. This was the second vision. As opposed to both of them, these are not antagonistic to each other, these two visions. This was an extension of what should be, ideally, a country that we would all want to live in, a socialist India. But as opposed to this, you had a very antagonistic third vision that developed, that emerged. And this third vision argued, and they continue to argue even today, that the character of independent India should be based on the religious affiliation of its people. And this third vision had a twin expression. You had one vision of what is called the Hindu Rashtra, then, or the Hindutva Rashtra today, as it's articulated, and the other was the Islamic Republic. The Muslim League then argued for the Islamic Republic. The RSS and the Hindutva forces then argued for a Hindutva, Hindutva Rashtra or Hindu Rashtra. Now, this led to the unfortunate partition of India, the formation of Pakistan. But India, the rest of India, remained and decided to remain a secular democratic republic. And that decision of the people of India at that point of time was something that the Hindu Rashtra proponents did not naturally agree with. And it was this anger or a disappointment or a frustration, whatever you may call it, that led to the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, saying that you are not allowing this country into becoming a Hindu Rashtra. But the fact of the matter is that India today has the largest, second largest population of Muslims. Indonesia is larger than our Muslim population. But second largest population of Muslims in the world living as a minority in a democracy. Now that makes India a very, very unique place. So the idea of India was that it is a country that is inclusive. That is inclusive in terms of our identities, linguistic identity, caste identity, religious identities, whatever you have. It is inclusive of all these identities put together. That is what makes it an Indian. And then as opposed to this, you had an exclusivist idea of India, which is what is the Hindutva Rashtra, or the Islamic Republic, what Pakistan had. Now the tragedy is that many people from here in Hyderabad, even my childhood friends, some of them who migrated to Pakistan, many of them went off to Australia. Now many more are going. But the fellow who went off to Pakistan, he actually sent me a very, very wry and a very dangerous message in 2019, I think. He said, "Arey, तुम्हें 70 साल लग गए हमारे जगह पहुंचने के." They took you 70 years to reach where Pakistan is. Military dictatorship and autocracy. अब अवकाश पे आ गए तुम भी. अवकाश पे आ गए. I mean, what you're creating this plural society, inclusive India, and that inclusive India, if that has to be transformed into a rabidly intolerant, exclusivist country like the Hindutva Rashtra, what is needed is actually the destruction of the basis of creation of this secular democratic republic. And the basis of that creation is the Constitution of India. Now, unless this Constitution of India is destroyed, you cannot convert the secular democratic republic into a Hindutva Rashtra or whatever it is. But during this process of the struggle, the idea that there are two nations inside India were articulated, and the first person to articulate that was Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. He was the first one who brought out saying that there are two countries in India, an Islam, a Muslim and a Hindu. There are two nations. Muhammad Ali Jinnah picks that up 2 years later. And then he puts forward saying, I agree, there are two nations in India. There should be an Islamic Republic and then whatever else you want to have. So this two-nation theory was articulated then, and then a theory was put forward, which is now also very current and very popular among the last section of people. Theory is put forward that what does Hindutva mean? What is the meaning of Hindutva? According to them, Hindutva means all those whose Matrabhumi, Pitrabhumi, and Punyabhumi is in India. So that leaves out whom? The Christians and the Muslims. He says that your Punya Bhumi is outside, so therefore you are not Indian. That is the definition. But what the idea of India and inclusive India was arguing was, wherever you are, whatever you are, which faith you belong to, etc., etc., the fact that you are human being, you are an Indian, so you are an Indian, and that is my idea of India. And that is what our constitution defines us. Irrespective of caste, creed, or sex, these are the words in the constitution. It should be gender now, but we should change it. But anyway, that is all the English was 30 years ago. But this battle is now that is going on in our country today is actually whether this foundation of this idea of India will remain or not. If that has to be replaced by this Hindutva Rashtra, you will have to destroy this constitution. And the constitution stands on four fundamental foundational pillars. One is secular democracy. The second is our economic sovereignty. The third is social justice. And the fourth is federalism, or the relation between the union and the states, union government and the state governments. Now, each one of these pillars is under assault today. Secular democracy. Now, the Supreme Court is hearing that Marriage Act the case today, the Special Marriage Act. I was married under that. We all choose that in the sense that we don't want the Hindu right or the Islamic right or whatever it is. The Special Act is what defines us. Now, that is but today, every single BJP ruled state has new laws that have been passed, either in the name of love jihad or in any other name of cow protection, making an interfaith marriage virtually impossible. And in fact, criminalizing interfaith marriages and saying that this is actually, you have been forcible conversions. Now, when I got married to this half Muslim, I mean, nobody even thought of anybody converting. I mean, there's no question. I mean, apart from the fact that I'm an atheist, I can't be converted into anything. So that will be difficult. But so is she. And that's it. So, but the point is now you make it impossible to virtually ostracize the other, the minority. Secularism, democracy. You see the number of people who are in jail without charges being framed against them. For 3 years, there's a Elgar that case in which Elgar Parishad, case in which people are there. Now, one by one, hopefully they'll all get bail. It is now begun. 3 years they've been there without charges being filed. You can be kept under detention at the whim and fancy of the sedition law that is being applied and used indiscriminately. And everything is under police custody. Therefore, what is happening is even before the judgment is passed, you are being punished. For 3 years being in jail is punishment. That is your democracy and democratic rights. I mean, how they're being dealt with. Now, I can go on giving you lots of examples, but I'm sure all of you are aware of all that. So, secular democracy, that is under severe strain. Economic sovereignty, there's nothing left in the country that is not being privatized. And now, I don't know how many of you in the IT sector, I mean, all of you must be working for the private companies. And I mean, I believe they mushroomed a lot during the COVID period. And good. I'm glad that all these youngsters are getting good jobs. But I don't know how many of them, how much is this moonlighting going on, and how much is, how many of you are actually getting what you used to get as your wages now, or whether they've been used as the excuse to cut your wages and salaries and remuneration. No, all apart from that, the economic sovereignty of the country is at complete stake. Everything privatized. Foreign capital allowed absolute access to everything, including services in our country, to make profits from. And our big corporate kings, so to speak, the Adanis and the Ambanis, from 300 odd position in the world's billionaires, Adani is now reached number 2, I think. 2 or 4, depends on whoever comes in. And he's competing with Jeff Bezos now. So I mean, the question is that it's private capital in India, big private capital, not the small ones. Small ones are getting ruined. The big private capital and foreign capital that's virtually taken over our economy. And this goes with the kickbacks that come along with this takeover. And that is why you have this, what is called the legalization of political corruption through these electoral bonds. That is currently being used by the ruling party to raise funds. I mean, I don't know how much more they want to raise, but they keep raising these funds. And so the economy is mortgaged virtually. So economic sovereignty is gone. Social justice, the more you create a country with these laws which are exclusivist, like we talked about the love jihad and the cow protection, etc. Apart from that, the entire question of the attacks on the Dalits and women, particularly, these have been escalating exponentially. And this, instead of moving towards social justice and your tribals, all their lands, we just heard the song where into the Urgil Tawar. You just heard the song where your land, I mean the forest lands, are being taken over by the corporates and handed over to them the natural dwelling of our tribals. And we brought a law when the UPA was there. We forced the UPA to get that law saying that forest right site, get the legal right to the tribals to live with the forests. Now that is completely being imposed. Instead of social justice, you are moving to a social injustice. And then federalism, center-state, relations. I mean, every day, the governors of every non-BJP ruled states are virtually interfering to run the state. Kerala governor, we have a continuous Tamil Nadu governor. Now KCR has also started talking over your Telangana governor. Then you had the Maharashtra governor. So all these governors whose a constitutional office, they are not supposed to interfere in the conduct of the government, and they are supposed to act at the advice of the council of ministers in the state. On the contrary, they are interfering and trying to run the government. So center-state relations, what should be the share of the states in terms of tax revenues? That doesn't go to the states. There's a ceiling on how much the states can borrow. The net result is what? That the states, unable to find their resources, have to go with a begging bowl to the center. And the cost of that is, you support this government at the center, then you will be given some dole. So the independence of each state and state government and our linguistic nationalities that inhabit our country, I mean, that is being completely eroded. Now, if these four pillars that we are talking about, if these four are being eroded, you also need to make sure that the institutions created by our constitution also do not function independently, because they can be big checks and balances over abuse of power by the government that be. So you start the institutions of what? First of all is the parliament. The parliament has been reduced as a talking shop now. Sometimes I think I did the best thing because I left the parliament at the right time. Because after that, there's been no discussion in the parliament. you only show your hand, majority passes a law, bill. No discussions are taking place. Parliament has been reduced to a talking shop where there's a tyranny of the majority. I call it tyranny. It's actually tyranny of the majority. Then the judiciary. You see now some good changes are coming in the judiciary, but you see the people who destroyed the Babri Masjid were given the right to build the temple there. I mean, which the court itself said. That's what we said. They delivered a verdict on the Ayodhya issue, but they have not delivered justice. So these courts, the way the courts are functioning itself, will presently allow such violation of our constitutional norms. Then, of course, you have the election commission. Now a big battle is going on in the Supreme Court on what should the, how the election commission should function. Otherwise, the election commission has virtually been, I mean, all its decisions have been very favorable to the ruling party. They're supposed to be independent. Without a free and fair election, no democracy can survive. And if elections are not free and fair, then that is the undermining of democracy. And then you have your ED and the CBI. This has now become the joke. It's Rakshasuలు వస్తారని పడుకోబెట్టేవాళ్ళు పిల్లలు. ఇప్పుడు అదే ఈడీ వస్తుంది బాగుపడండి ఇప్పుడు అదే ఇప్పుడు అవుతుంది. CBI and ED. Anything that you got, I mean, these fellows are there to get you. And then first of all, put you in custody. Ultimately, 90% of these cases will be proved and the people will be shown to be innocent. But in the process, 4 years, 5 years, like I said earlier, you have gone through the punishment. So what is happening is the destruction of the Constitution of India, the destruction of each independent institutions. Now, this has to be stopped. This is being done only because the BJP today controls the reins of power, controls the government. And unless you separate them from the government, we cannot save this idea of India that we are all talking of. So what do I mean by the idea of India? What is that idea that I have of India? Or all of us must have, should have. That it's an India where there's sacrosanct is the question of equality. Everybody will be known as a human being and not as a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or whatever it is, not as a Brahmin or a Dalit or whatever that may be. But first basic category is a human being. And on that basis, you're a citizen of India and each one of us is equal. That is a fundamental basis. If each one of us is equal, then each one of us has the equal access to everything that the country has. And if you haven't have equal access, you have to create that sort of an egalitarian society, which will have to move towards socialism. Otherwise, you cannot have equal access to everything to everybody. And in that equal access that you want to have is also the question of today. Well, it is connected with all of you. The question of equal access to technology, equal access to carbon, which is your climate change, which is your carbon space, equal access to your technology, equal access to carbon, equal access to all your natural resources. If that has to be achieved, there cannot be any royalty or a premium in accessing either nature or technology. So that's why whether you talk of a free software, you talk of a free access to all your technological advances that you are making, that sort of a society will have to be created, and that would be an idea of India, whereby this technology is put to use for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of profit. Now that is a big struggle that all of you engaged in your software fields will all have to contribute in creating that sort of a society. Today, honestly speaking, many people today really do not understand why most people don't really understand how even their cell phones work. They only know which button to press and what to do when. And that's about it. When the Soviet Union existed, I'm telling you as an aside, diversion, but it's a very interesting one. When the Soviet Union was existing, they were doing research on a hypothesis, saying that there was knowledge in human society much before that particular thing was discovered. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. If you divide the height and the base of any pyramid that is standing, it works out to pi. Now, the pi was discovered in Greece some 2000 years after the pyramids were built. So, was it only an accident that the pyramids were built in that thing? But how can it be that the same ratio applies to every pyramid? So, they must have had that knowledge earlier. That's the hypothesis. They must have had the knowledge earlier. So, if they had the knowledge earlier, what happened? Every religion begins with the pralayam or the apocalypse. I mean, from which God saved. I mean, the Noah's Ark in Christianity or Matsyavatara in Hindu mythology. Every religion begins with the apocalypse. Scientifically, it has been shown that thrice at least in the existence of the earth, the poles interchanged. The North Pole became South Pole, South Pole became North Pole. In such a thing, that creates an apocalyptic condition. Everything is in churning. So that could be the basis of a human memory, that came down from various generations about this pralayam or apocalypse. So in one of these times, the human race got eliminated. In Noah's Ark, according to mythology, only few couples were alive. In Matsyavatara, I mean, Vishnu was supposed to carry only one load of set of people, all the rest perish. The people who survived, they knew which switch to press, but they didn't know what happens when the switch presses. Knowledge is not there. They only knew the mechanics. So the people who survived settled down along the major rivers that were formed after this apocalypse. And that is why you have, whether it is the Amazon or the Mississippi, Nile, our own Ganges, or the Yangtze in China. So major rivers, people settled down. They had they didn't have the knowledge, but they knew the technique. So that is what happened with the pyramids thing. So today, most of the people are in that stage. We don't have knowledge, but we only have the technique. You have the knowledge, people who are working in this field. You will have to carry this knowledge, disseminate so that people like me also understand it better. Now, how does one do it? So that means a complete free access to technology, free access to the use of technology. And therefore, this equality that we are talking about is not only material equality, but it is also an intellectual equality. An idea of India is an India where you have that intellectual equality and where everybody is capable of accessing that technology. Now, that is where it comes down to the capacity. We are one of the youngest countries in the world. Estimated 54% of our population is below the age of 25. All of you are the inheritors of India. My generation's expiry date has come, so we will be on our way out. But you will have to create the India that you want to live in. And what is that India you want to live in? An India of inequality, an India of hatred, an India of violence, an India whereby the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister, at an election campaign in Himachal the other day, and we have CPM has got elected MLAs there. So the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister comes there and says, "Arey, ye kaise hua? देवभूमि में कम्युनिस्ट कैसे जीत रहे हैं? देवभूमि में कम्युनिस्ट कैसे जीत रहे हैं? राक्षस कैसे आ गया? इनको नहीं जिता रहा." अब रनर like for the job is so that I had to tell him, देवभूमि में अमृत काल बोलते हो तुम. Amritam was born out of the Samudra Manthan, the ocean's churning. And when Amritam came up in one on the Kalash, as they call it, at the same time, poison also came out in another Kalash. So what does the mythological story tell us? As soon as the Amritam came, the first people who got hold of Amritam were the Rakshasas. They took it and ran away. Now Devatas had to spin a big conspiracy, somehow to get that back and give the Rakshasas the poison Kalash. So I said, today we are in that stage. The Rakshasas have taken away the Amritam. Modi and Yogi give it the Amritkal. We'll have to get it back from them and use that for the benefit of the people in the country. So that is the struggle in which we are in. So unless you ensure that none of this equality in access that we are talking about can be achieved. So your generation has to decide, what sort of India you want. Where you have this inequality, absolute abuse of human dignity that is happening today, or you want to change this into a better society. Now that is the choice that you people have. And that is why you will have to retrieve this Amritam back in the interest of the people and in the interest of the country. Now, if this 54% of India is not properly empowered, that is educated, health facilities, and employment. This demographic advantage that we have today, dividend as they call it, can become a demographic burden. And this youth, if it's now misled out of circumstances, drug abusers or some other thing, or into crime, into petty crime, then God forbid the India that we are thinking of will never emerge. So we are empowering this youth, and that is where the struggles have to be waged. Where jobs for all, education for all. This is something we'll have to achieve for the sake of our own country, for the sake of your own future. So therefore, without these struggles, intensifying these struggles, that sort of an India cannot be created. And that is where the unity of the people will have to be built in struggles. And that is the only way in which the potential of what is India can be achieved. If this 54% is fully educated, has good health, nobody can stop. Nobody can stop the Indian youth from emerging as the leaders of the knowledge society of the world. We have that potential. We have to realize that potential. Realization of that potential is the idea of India. It is my idea of India. And that you have to realize that all of us will together have to work to ensure that it is possible. It is possible. It is realizable. Except that the obstacles that are preventing it must be removed from the way. And the biggest obstacle is the current government that we have in our country. That should be off the government, and then we move towards creating or consolidating this idea of India. So that's why my final appeal to all of you. I think I'm not taking more than one period in a class, no? I don't know, nowadays your generation has classes in periods or online? Online mostly. Anyway, so my final appeal to all of you is that it's your India. You will have to shape it the way you want it. And if you want to shape it as the idea of India that we were discussing so far, then you will have to join together and struggle for it to achieve it. Otherwise, there's no other alternative. Either we live as human beings together, or we perish as Hindus, Muslims, and Christians, etc., etc., or Brahmins, Dalits, etc., etc. There's enough divisions in our country to divide us and finish us. There's only one thing that can keep us all together, that is humanism. And that is what has to be strengthened. And that is the idea of India. So please, preserve this India. I would not say my generation contributed and also contributing also negatively now at this present stage. But it's always been a struggle. You'll have to carry forward that struggle. Consolidate this idea of India. And I'm sure that you'll be able to do it. You're much brighter than what we were at your age. You got much more knowledge than what we had at your age. And you got much more exposure than what we had at your age. So please, you should use all those advantages that you have and create a better India. That is my appeal to you. And thank you very much for listening.
Just 2 more minutes, friends. Please be seated. Please be seated. Thank you so much, Sitaram Garu. And I think I can answer on behalf of all the participants and audience over here that we do firmly believe in the idea of India that you have exposed, and we will continue the struggle that your generation has taken forward. Thank you so much once again. Friends, if there are any questions, maybe I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions. Can we have one more mic passed over there? If we have another mic. Please stand up. Pass the mic. 1 minute. If there are others who have questions, please maybe come forward. We can perhaps take 2 or 3 questions, maybe. Can you just come forward so that everybody can listen to us? And after this, please do not leave. We will go for a small group photo session near the states. After this, we'll just go there for a group selfie. One photo. Or what will they call? Groupie? Group fee? Not a selfie, group fee. Yeah. Did you get the mic? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Sir, first of all, thank you to sir. And sir, I am supposed to be asked how much I liked his conversation. But sir, I am very much disappointed by your conversation. Because when I heard from my comrade, fellow comrade, that I am going to listen Sitaram Yechury, I thought, oh, he will use such mysticism, vague word, which interterrestrial word, which I want. But you use simple words, plain words, even a fourth standard
I'm a
can
simple
understand.
man.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question is, sir, you said now this is our India, sir. Your generation has passed. You are supposed to pass the baton on us. Sir, we are nationalism. I am talking about nationalism. Was having a discussion with one of my fellow friends, and I said, why do you need nationalism? What would you do with it? Because he was from the government side, sir. So says, oh, we need nationalism. Without it, we are nothing. Okay, I am asking, sir, why do we need nationalism? And since we are a country where the majority religion is in very much majority, so if it is actively or passively, we are supposed to have an element of religion in our nationalism, even if you want or not. What is the concept of nationalism according to you, and how much of this religious thing is supposed to enter this nationalism dialogue? Thank
Well,
you.
nationalism by definition, I don't go by definitions of nationalism. I'm basically an internationalist. I don't believe only in nationalism. I'm an internationalist. Okay. So, what do you mean by religion and nationalism? What does religion tell you? According to all faiths and beliefs, religion is supposed to be the relationship between the Atma and the Brahman, the micro and the macro. And if you look at it in terms of universe, if you look at it in terms of material terms, it is the micro and the macro. And the interrelationship micro and macro is full of contradictions. That's how they develop. Without contradiction, neither micro develops nor macro develops. So anyway, let's not enter into that field of dialectics. But the choice of who would be my Brahman, with whom I want to unite, that is this Atman's choice. Whether I believe as a Hindu, I want to reach my Brahman. As a Muslim, I want to reach. As a Christian, I want to reach. As a Buddhist, I want to reach. Or as an atheist, I don't want to reach. That is my choice. What does it got to do with the nation or nationalism? So this is a purely personal affair of an individual. And nationalism means respecting that right, protecting that right. The same thing means also protecting the right of saying that no other religion can come and interfere in my choice. No, you cannot come to me and say that my God is better than your God. Who's my God? When even God can't interfere. Rama cannot come and ask you why are you praying to Krishna. or Ganesh Chaturthi, when both Rama and Krishna
I would like to say that your speech was really a brain opening or an eye opener speech. I wanted to ask my question. I wanted to get to my question. My question is that as humans, we all have a brain, and our brains are not capable of processing a lot of information, right? So my idea of a better future is that actions or any decision can be taken by humans as a collective rather than a center. Okay. So if there are centers of power, so that is where like inefficiency occurs, because this person cannot a person on the top cannot make a decision for everybody. So wouldn't it be a better idea if there are no centers of power and the whole power to take a decision for the people would be in the hands of the people, or a centralization of power where the power is decentralized among the people. So that is what I believe that a future of a nation or the future would like, because if you have a centralization of power, that is where the inefficiencies come, right? So what do you think about it?
Not only inefficiency, that's where even abuse of power comes. If you have centralization of power, and that's where it's abused. You see, you have to draw a line between people's will should not result in anarchy. So you're required to channelize all that will. The process of channelizing is what creates a political authority in the center, not centralization. The people have to go into become. But what you are talking about, the brain unable to process everything, which is in a sense correct. But to a large extent, even today, when we don't use much of our brains, that is the real problem. I'm talking about physically, but not only mentally. Physically, in terms of the sheer size, if you go to the Peking Man caves near Beijing today, where the earliest of the human earth, I mean, it's now disputed whether they are Homo sapiens or not. It was an earlier stage than that. There's an exhibition on the size of the human brain, how it can, and it's actually showing that the size is shrinking. The brain is telling us, hey, I've given you so much capacity, you're not using it, so why should I be so large? It's actually shrinking. I mean, you go back to monkeys some millions of years later, say you use only 2 or 3%. Now, the process is not that all of it is registered. It's all there. So that's why when you talk of GPS nowadays, you forgot GPRS. You see, the retrieval, the problem is in retrieving. Not only positioning, but retrieving. So it is all there in the. So whatever, when you process it, you're right in the sense that collectively, you take much more creative decision, because brain also has an evolutionary memory. So whatever has happened in the earlier stages, it's all there inside. I don't know if your generation, and I hope the girls don't misunderstand me. If I tell you an example of my generation when we were growing up. Always you had when you were together, when you were walking around for the same, suddenly the girl says, somebody is staring at me. We turned around and mocking them. And nobody is there staring at you. And invariably, you turn around, you will find somebody staring. What is that sixth sense there? It's not sixth sense. That time when the brain was evolving, there was what we call today, it's called the fly's eye. A fly has 360-degree vision, but it can't focus. And that is what the radar is. It's from the fly's eye, the radar was invented, following that. So radar can catch something, but doesn't know what it is unless you probe further. So it has a 360-degree vision. In many of the women, that faculty is something that they are able to retrieve even partially. So they get what we call the sixth sense is actually the brain work. Now we can all get most of the brain start working if we collectively move together. So it's a decentralization there means that you allow people to decide for their own what is good for them, but at the same time, collectively also, together decide what is good for the society at large, in general. So you'll have to have a proper, correct mix between the process of centralization and decentralization. Not allowing centralization to reduce itself into abuse of power or authority, like it's happening today. To allow it to be decentralized, which is for the larger benefit of society. I hope I got your question. Huh?
No. We will not yet. We can discuss with
Thank you so much, Sitaram garu. One important announcement. One of the Chaurasta band members misplaced their phone here. It's a Samsung phone. It has the Chaurasta sticker on it. If any of you find it, please do get in touch with me or with the band Chaurasta. It's a Samsung phone. It has Chaurasta sticker on it. Please do search for it. It's misplaced somewhere here. We also, on behalf of Techies for a Better India, I should thank all of you once again. Thanking Sitaram garu, thanking Chaurasta, and also everybody who had made the time out over here to come over here. Thank you once again. I hope to see you soon. In fact, there are some posters around showing different things. There's disparities, how is the world, everything. There's a poster exhibition. You can look at some of these things. We'll talk outside. We have time. We can interact informally. We can do our posters. In fact, on the 11th of December, there's a seminar again here on the recession and impact on the IT industry, especially Indian IT. Please do pass this among your friends and colleagues in the IT industry or students who will be interested in this. December 11th, we have another seminar. There's some snack waiting outside. Please do get your snack. And can we all gather at the space over there for a group photo? All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sitaram garu. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, everyone.